welcome. A week of birthdays. There's someone's actual birthday, someone else's official birthday. You can probably guess who they are. So Lizzie and I are here to talk about all of those things that we now know that we didn't know last week. Hi, Lizzie.
Hello. Hi.
You're not 99 years old, are you?
I don't know. Do I look it?
No, not at all. But we're talking about someone who was 99 this week.
Well, we've actually been able to see each other in person this week, haven't we? A few times, which has been
nice. Actually, because the stories have been so busy. There was one story on Monday about Prince Andrew. We will talk about that. A new development, a new interesting development. How can we put this? A more muscular response from his team. So that was interesting. We've had the Duke of Edinburgh being 99 years of age. We've had, oh my goodness.
Hang on a minute.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I'm going to do your
rundown.
I'm going to do your rundown. Why don't you do your rundown, and then we're going to talk about all these things that are on my list.
Yeah, thanks for stealing my show there.
Yeah, sorry. Robinson's Royal Rundown. Here we go.
I'll start from the top. So,
in
Prince
3,
Philip,
2, 1.
Prince Philip, as you've already told everyone, turned 99 this week, and we were treated to a new photograph of him and the Queen. The Queen, we have had details of a mini Trooping the Colour that's going to take place at Windsor Castle this weekend, where we will see the Queen. And we've also had her first ever video call to mark Carers Week 2020. Prince Andrew, this has erupted this week, a sort of war of words between Prince Andrew's legal team and the US authorities. There's been quite a lot of back and forth between the two. Prince William revealed he has secretly been volunteering for the crisis text line Shout, and a new image was released of him and Princess Charlotte and Prince George volunteering on the Sandringham estate.
Yes, and Kate's, although we've spoken about this already, Kate's said that she wants more pictures on top of the 12,000 that have already been sent in for her Hold Still campaign. So plenty to get through. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe. Just search ITV Royal Rota on YouTube. Subscribe. Thank you for keeping watching. It's also available if you're listening to us on all your podcast platforms by searching ITV Royal Rota.
We are also, we should mention that we're joined this week by a very special guest. And that's
Indeed.
Ojo, who is CEO of the Diana Award. So she's going to join us for a segment in the middle.
Yeah, and actually Tessy's got a lot to talk about, not just in terms of what they're doing at the Diana Award, which was set up in the memory of the late Princess Diana, but also how they're coping in lockdown, how it's changed their charity. But also, we chat about the race situation in the UK, and also how that's affected, or how Tessy thinks it affected Meghan's decision to leave the royal family and relocate to Los Angeles, where we all know they're living. So that's a really fascinating discussion to come. Let's start with the Queen and the Duke then. So, bang, that picture taken last Monday, the Queen and the Duke in the quadrangle of Windsor Castle. We've got a picture of the two of them for his 99th birthday. So he's creeping towards 100, not there yet, but they thought it was worthy of marking with a new photograph.
This is great, isn't it? It's a new image, and the first time we've seen Prince Philip since he was released from hospital in December on Christmas Eve after a 4-night stay. And I mean, you know, at 99, I think he looks incredible. He's sort of ramrod straight, very smartly dressed, standing in the sunshine at Windsor Castle. It's a great picture for the album.
Yeah, it is. And actually, as we ran on News at 10 this week, there have been, you know, obviously so many pictures of them through the years, from when they first met, seriously met, I suppose, at the Royal Naval Dartmouth College down in the southwest of England. There was their engagement photo in 1947, the wedding, and on and on and on and on and on. And we were just talking about the numbers, weren't we? 99 years of age, 72 years of marriage, and 68 years as the longest serving consort to the Queen. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, it's they just keep notching up these new records, don't they? The pair of them. It's Great.
But one record he hasn't quite notched up at the moment, which is the fact
I knew you were going to ask me this. I knew you were going to ask
oldest royal. So who is the oldest royal ever to have lived?
Princess Alice, the Queen's aunt, who made it to 102. And
Princess Alice was the Duchess of Gloucester. She was married to
the Duke of Gloucester.
Yes, who was also Prince Henry, who was the third son of George V. So George V obviously had three children, so three boys. One of them was Henry, the third one, Duke of Gloucester. The second one was obviously the Queen's father, who went on to become King George VI. And the first one was the abdicated one, Edward VIII, who became king and stopped being king in 1936. Anyway, so she lived too.
Yeah, number two is the Queen Mother, who was 101 when she passed
quite
away.
Close to her 102nd birthday, wasn't she? But no, she only made it to 101. Only, I say.
It's incredible, isn't it? And the Duke now at 99.
And the Duke at 99. So the third oldest royal, but the longest serving consort in British history. And actually, despite your age, as we probably learnt from Captain Tom Moore, who raised all those millions and millions of pounds for the NHS by walking up and down his garden. Being 99 doesn't stop you from doing things. And we learnt a very interesting fact about how the Duke keeps himself so fit this week, which you were particularly taken by.
Yes, this is possibly one of my favourite facts of the week. We did an interview with Phil Dampier, who is an author and has written books on Prince Philip, and he told us that Prince Philip, one of the ways that he stays so fit is that every day he does Canadian Air Force exercises.
Which he's still doing at age 99.
All of those figures are quite amazing. 99 years of age, 72 years of marriage, 68 years as consort to the monarch. They're all pretty staggering figures now, aren't they?
Yes, there isn't a record they haven't broken, really. As I say, the only record he probably hasn't broken is being the oldest ever royal. So he's certainly the oldest male royal. And yes, they just go on and on. We've sort of run out of superlatives to talk about the records they've broken, and it's just incredible. But I think he once said that the marriage is successful because you have different interests. And obviously that'd be very difficult to pursue those interests in lockdown. But I'm sure that they've been getting on because they understand each other, they know each other's sense of humour, and they know what makes each other tick. So I'm sure that's helped.
And he kind of would after all these years, wouldn't he?
If you don't know each other after 72 years, you probably wouldn't. But he's very much in a daily routine. Every morning, even now at his age, he still does his daily Canadian Air Force exercises, which have kept him very fit. And he's got the same figure. There's not an ounce of fat on him. He's got the same figure as he's had for 50 years ago, and gave up smoking on the eve of his wedding to the Queen, and doesn't drink very much. Eats extremely well. Eats little and often is the philosophy of both of them. And that's how they keep fit.
And as Phil was saying there, and Phil's written about the Duke of Edinburgh many times, it's quite unusual for the Queen and Prince Philip to spend so much time together, because he's normally at Wood Farm in Sandringham. It's where he spent a lot of his retirement, so the Queen can get on with being Queen. For them to spend so much time together at Windsor Castle as they are doing is actually quite unusual.
Yeah, so Philip moved from Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate to join the Queen at Windsor Castle in March, just ahead of the lockdown, and they've been there together ever since. And this is sort of rare for them to be spending so much time together, but you know, in their latter years, it's quite lovely that they're actually having a chance to reconnect.
And if there's any idiosyncrasies that they've got, you would have thought they would have found them out after 72 years of marriage. But also the way they're being looked after is quite interesting. They've got a coterie of staff that act in sort of little bubbles on a 3-week on, 3-week off basis. And that just is trying to ensure that the infection isn't spreading to two vulnerable people in their 90s. So that's kind of how it's going at Windsor Castle for the foreseeable future. But we actually are going to see the Queen at Windsor Castle weekend.
Link, because the quadrangle where that photograph was taken of the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh is where we are going to see the Queen on Saturday for what's sort of being dubbed a mini Trooping the Colour.
So Trooping the Colour is not happening because of coronavirus. This is the Queen's official birthday. Always happens on the second Saturday in June. Normally a massive parade in central London outside Buckingham Palace. This year, not so.
No, she's going to view a military ceremony And all this is going to happen within the confines of Windsor Castle. So the public are very much being urged not to try and turn up to see anything, because they won't be able to. And everything that is happening on Saturday will be strictly observing social distancing guidelines. So the Queen is going to be greeted by a military salute. There'll be a series of military drills as a band plays, and then the ceremony will conclude with a second salute. And that's all being carried out by the first battalion of the Welsh Guards, whose colour was due to be trooped this year had the ceremony have gone ahead as usual.
And the Welsh Guards, I think, are one of those that are currently being based in Windsor in any case. Now, a question I get asked a lot, why does the Queen have two birthdays? Why has she got her actual birthday in April and her official birthday in June?
Well, this goes back, doesn't it, to a
previous monarch.
A previous monarch whose birthday, I think, was in November. And so the weather wasn't traditionally, isn't
ever any good in November.
Isn't very good in November. So they decided to mark the official birthday in June when it's brighter weather. Although looking out the window today, it is fairly autumnal here in the UK.
Not fantastic, is it? But it has been good up until now here in the UK. King George II, I believe, was the king who wanted this military parade to happen in the summer. So that takes you back to 17 something, I believe. Anyway, there we are. A bit of royal history covered off. But no matter the Queen's age, 94 as she is now, it doesn't stop her from doing what we're doing now, which is a Zoom call or we presume it was Zoom. It could have been FaceTime. It could have been WhatsApp audio. Who knows what the Queen's got? Skype perhaps. But she managed to herself, and that's the first time we've seen her on a Zoom video call that she did with her daughter, Princess Anne.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, that at 94, all she's done, all she's seen, all she's travelled, that she's still, there are still firsts for the Queen.
Yeah, and actually, so let's have a little watch of that video that Buckingham Palace has put up of the Queen and her daughter speaking to carers for National Carers Week 2020.
I've been a carer officially really since I was 8. I only recognised when I was 11 or 12, so it takes a while for any carer to recognise they are a carer.
Psychiatrist, a nurse, a sociologist. I have to be. Oh, you put all these different hats on, and then you can lose your sense of self as well.
I think we all recognise that we know carers somewhere, and we have stopped and wondered how on earth we can help.
Just a little bit of recognition and support goes a long way for unpaid carers.
Described as the unsung heroes, but the odd song would not go amiss.
There's young carers up here watching this. I hope that they can see that there are other people in this situation that are similar to them and that they're not alone.
Interesting listening to all your tales and stories, and I'm very impressed by what you have achieved already. So I'm very glad to have been able to join you today.
I'm not sure quite how we seamlessly go from the Queen's achievement in making a Zoom call to a new development for her second son, Prince Andrew. Now, let's be clear, there's no new allegations about him. You'll know from the statements he's made previously, but also from that disastrous television interview, that he's vehemently denied allegations made that girls were trafficked to him for sex, victims of Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, very serious allegations as they are, but he has always vehemently denied them. And yet, under Buckingham Palace, he wasn't able to put out much more than very sort of short statements. We had a very different approach from him, didn't we? We a much more bullish approach from his new legal team. Now they don't have the shackles, if you like, of Buckingham Palace anymore, to actually hit out quite harshly at the US Department of Justice for the way in which it's handled its part of this investigation, and the fact that they want to speak to him as a witness, not a suspect, but a witness. It was quite a surprise to us all, that, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. This was a sort of war of words that started between Andrew's legal team and the US authorities that played out quite publicly for us all to see earlier this week. And this started after it emerged on one of the front pages in the UK on The Sun that something called a mutual legal assistance request had been made to the Home Office to question Prince Andrew as a witness. So an MLA is a request between foreign countries to obtain help in an investigation of criminal
in a
offence.
criminal or legal matter, which this clearly is.
So this is him being requested as a witness, not as a suspect, to be clear.
So that you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, does it mean he can be extradited?" That's not what we're talking about here, because that only happens if you're a suspect for a serious crime. He is not, but the US authorities do want to speak to him as a witness, because someone who's Prince Andrew has admitted stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's homes in New York and on the US Virgin Isles and all the rest of it. So they do want to speak to him, and it was quite unusual that they decided to make public their request, or at least leak is the allegation, their request to speak to Prince Andrew. And that was the main gripe, the main bugbear that Prince Andrew's legal team had, was that all of this should be done in strict confidentiality to encourage people to come forward. And yet we've now got this playing out in the very public sphere, that they want to talk to Prince Andrew and they want the Home Office's help, the UK Home Office's help, to speak to him under this mutual legal assistance that you just mentioned.
So we had the front page, and then later that day, the Duke of York's legal team put out a robust statement. It was quite lengthy, but I think the passage that we all focused in on said that the Duke of York has on at least 3 occasions this year offered his assistance to the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, the DOJ has reacted to the first 2 offers by breaching their own confidentiality rules and claiming the Duke has offered zero cooperation. And they went on to suggest that that was perhaps the DOJ doing that for publicity. And this comes that when they're talking about zero cooperation here, they are echoing what was said by Jeffrey Berman, the US Attorney for the Southern District of New York, where he has made several statements earlier this year in January and March saying that the Duke of York was absolutely refusing to cooperate.
So you wonder where we were left then. So you had the Duke's team saying that he has offered to cooperate. You had Jeffrey Berman saying twice in public in New York that there's been zero cooperation and the Prince had shut the door on the investigation. And then Berman responded and said, well, hold on, it was the same legal team that said to us there was no circumstances under which that the Duke would talk to you, and has refused to. So we were left in a very confusing situation with one side saying X, the other side saying Y, and we were none the wiser really as what actually has happened.
Yeah, the US team swiped back saying that the Duke was again seeking to falsely portray himself to the public. And then, I mean, we were
willing to help,
we were editing right up to News at 10, and we were still getting sources texting us with the Duke of York's legal team fighting back yet again that they were frankly bewildered by this response from Berman.
It was like watching a game of legal tennis, wasn't it? And normally, you get a hit from one side, and then you sit and wait for Buckingham Palace to respond, and they don't respond, and you're waiting for ages. And then if they do respond, it's in a very sort of small way, and the ball barely travels back in the other direction. But this was something different. The ball was swinging across the court and then going back again, and it was quite like something we've never seen before, really, isn't it?
Extraordinary.
Now that he's left the royal family.
And it was almost as if the legal team had sort of sat there and weathered this and had had enough and decided to come out with their own rebuttal to what was
and so before we wrap up on this particular one, and we're going to speak to Tessy Ojo next from the Diana Award, let's just have a listen to Gloria Allred, because we spoke to her. She is one of the lawyers in the US, a quite well-known lawyer who is representing some of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And her view, and I suppose that was to go for many people, that who knows what the delay is? Is it Prince Andrew's fault? Is it the US Department of Justice's fault? But you know what? While the delay goes on, the victims of Jeffrey Epstein are simply not getting any answers.
I represent many victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and many of the victims that I have represented have volunteered to speak to the Department of Justice, to law enforcement, without any conditions whatsoever. They have not delayed. They have not avoided what they feel is their duty to help to find the truth. What is called for is transparency and the truth from Prince Andrew. He has to stop trying to deflect attention and have a sideshow. Let's get on with having him provide truthful information to the United States Department of Justice, to the prosecutors, to the victims' private attorneys, such as myself. And let's get on with learning the truth. Stop trying to avoid and evade that day. It's time for Prince Andrew to step up to the bar of justice. In fact, it's long overdue.
We're so happy that Tessy has joined us. Tessy from the Diana Award. And we've met before, haven't we, Tessy? I think it was last year at the award ceremony in the City of London. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's yeah, we met at in July, I think, about this time last year when we had the Duke of Sussex, who was keynoting at what was actually the very first National Mentoring Summit in the UK. And
you had some amazing mentors there. Completely amazing. They blew me away.
We did. And he had also just become a father. In fact, if it was the 2nd of May, I remember his speech. One of the things that was really telling in his speech was talking about the role of mentors and how fatherhood had given him that insight about we all as adults had, how we were responsible in some way for nurturing that next generation of young people. So
yeah. And that new responsibility that he had. It was interesting, wasn't it, Lizzie? The people we met when we were there.
It was, yeah, like you said, some of the characters that we met, spoke to, interviewed were incredibly inspiring and really, doing themselves huge justice.
And I must ask you, obviously that was when he was a member of the working royal family. Things have changed. I suppose I should ask you whether it's changed his relationship with the Diana Award, because it's himself and William, obviously, that are your key connections.
Yeah, no, obviously it feels like a lifetime ago now.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
But one of the things he always, the thing I always love about both Dukes is they are ultimate, they're so committed, and throughout this process they've reiterated that commitment and nothing has changed. It doesn't matter where they are in the world, they remain committed to the work that we do. I mean, of course, logistically there might be a bit of negotiation there.
They're a bit further away now, aren't they? Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we'll see him in person supporting one of your events in the future. I'm not asking you to give any secrets away here, but in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I hope so. I absolutely hope so. I know that, God knows when we can even get together in gatherings now. Definitely not this side of the year, but hopefully we will have something happening next year. But also the beauty of technology means that, they might pop in a Zoom call somewhere, you never know. So let's keep our fingers crossed. I'm not saying anything.
You sound like you might have sent him an invite.
Well, we always hope that we always offer them any opportunity to speak to our young people. And I hope that one of these, they might take up one of them soon. But,
we will keep a very close eye on your social media feed now.
No, wait.
Listen, Lizzie and I last week, didn't we, Lizzie? We spoke about Meghan's contribution to I suppose you could call it the global Black Lives Matter movement that grew out of the tragic death in America. And we were talking about Meghan's contribution and that sort of inspiring message that she gave to the girls at her former high school. I suppose, Tessy, you must have welcomed the diversity that she brought to the royal family, and in the same breath, it's a shame that diversity isn't there in terms of the working royal family at the moment, because she was able to reach people that say more traditional members of the royal family couldn't.
Yes, absolutely. I was privileged to attend the wedding, and I know how just the whole being at the wedding and understanding what that meant, that whole the new possibilities and the reach and the connection, where you had the everyday girl could say that, you know, it almost, in some way, I think I said something at that time that it kind of redefined who a princess is. A princess is someone who cares, not necessarily someone with blue eyes and that sort of stuff. So it really brought a whole new set of connections and possibilities. And yes, I was sad, personally sad, to see that when they left, because I think for lots of people who had hoped for that newness and that difference and a new season, for a lot of people that felt like that season was over. On one hand, she's still part of, she's not a working royal, but she's very much part of that family, and she still has, you know, like the statement she gave last week, or the video that was out last week, demonstrates that doesn't matter whether she's whether she's working or not working royal, she still has a platform, and she's still able to address issues and make connections. And young people or people still look up to her as that role model.
She has a huge platform, as you say. I mean, it's probably as big now, if not bigger than it was before. And they've still got their charity endeavour, whatever it's called, Archie-Well, to come, and we await for that. But actually, Lizzie and I were in Brixton on one of the very first engagements that Meghan and Harry did just after they announced they were getting engaged. And I always remember speaking to a member of the community there, and as you know, Brixton's a very diverse community in South London, and she said, you know, had the Queen turned up today to this, what was it, a radio station, Represent Radio, I wouldn't have bothered coming to see her, but Meghan Markle turning up, then I was right at the front of the queue.
Do you know, I think that's you know, that's poignant, and I think that also says in everything there is, you know, there is that passing of baton. That we have to engage. Our country is a hugely diverse country.
And what's been your thoughts about all the protests that we've had here? I mean, we should point out largely have been peaceful. There's been the tearing down of certain prominent statues in some cities.
I'm not one for, oh, let's go back and pull down every statue. That's not what I believe. But I believe that we need to be truthful. We need to accept what our past is. We need to teach it. I think there needs to be that almost relearning of embracing all of us, the good, the bad, and the evil, and let's learn from it and create a new society.
It hopefully feels like a moment, doesn't it? A kind of, at the moment, it does feel like potentially this has a chance for things to change. I mean, I found it quite interesting when Meghan was saying in her message to the students, she was talking about those 1992 riots when she was 11 or 12, and she said to the students that she hoped that they would have an understanding of what was happening then as part of their history, not as part of their reality, and that, you know, all these years later, still, for her, nothing seems to have changed.
It's a sensitive subject, but it's one that does need to be asked. And I just wondered what you made of all those claims on social media and elsewhere that Britain collectively didn't welcome Meghan into our country, into the royal family, in the way that perhaps we should have done. Do you think there was some barriers in the press? Do you think there were some problems with the institution of monarchy because, you know, Meghan's mother was black, her father is white? What's your view on all that?
I think firstly, the public was overwhelmingly welcoming. There was just, I think, when I think back at when the announcement was made and the wedding.
Compared to the wedding that you went to, yeah.
I've never seen such celebration. I've never, absolutely, in all my life, seen such a celebration. I mean, it felt like I was back to when Princess Diana was getting married. Somewhere along the line, something definitely went wrong, because suddenly the amount of hate that I saw and I read on socials that she was receiving was just unfair. I saw incidences where she probably wore something and she was criticized for doing that, or holding, especially the placing the hand on her belly when she was pregnant. There was a lot of criticism about that, but every woman does that. Most people do that. And I think there's only so much a person can take. I can understand if you're in a household and it feels like you never put any step right and you're always being criticized, but you see I suppose your other sister-in-laws are adored for everything they do. It generally makes you feel I'm not welcome, and the only reason it points to is because I'm Black.
And it is an important subject to tackle, and I think we really do appreciate your thoughts on it as well, sensitive as they are. I think it's something that the whole country will be interested to hear your views on. Just in terms of the other big topic at the moment, the pandemic. You can see we're all doing this from home. Ordinarily, we'd have you in the studio, Tessy, and we'd be able to see you face to face. Lizzie's in her house, in her flat, as you can see. And it's tough, isn't it, this whole working from home business, Lizzie?
Yeah, it's just very different. I think we're all used to doing sort of very social jobs and being out and about on engagements or traveling or seeing each other, whether it's in the office or out covering things. So yeah, it's very odd. How are you finding it, Tessy?
It is. So we've been working from home since March, and it is tough,
Wow.
Especially with a lot of our delivery is face-to-face with young people. And so firstly, we had to almost pivot and move everything online. But also, even in moving online, we needed to understand what young people's priorities were, because it couldn't just be business as usual. So very early on in March, we did a survey of young people, really trying to understand what their top 5 key priorities or concerns were. And towards the first thing that came through was mental health and well-being, family relationships, online safety, young people concerned about the amount of time they were spending online and how if they were going to be more at risk of, like contacts from people they don't want, access, and all that sort of stuff that goes with online.
In terms of your office, though, how are you coping? You like having meetings with everyone, trying to have virtual lunch breaks, or dare I say it, a virtual drink on a Friday night?
We do have a number of people in our team who live by themselves, and we are very aware that isolation has impact on your mental well-being, and we wanted to make sure we kept those water cooler conversations as much as we could. So we still do a Friday afternoon lunchtime thing. We do a Friday evening games night. We also introduce what's called the donut, where this random donut will match 2 people who are not in the same team, and they must have a virtual coffee that week to talk about non-work related things. It's kind of the thing that happens when you meet someone at the water cooler, where they're not necessarily from your team, and you just have a chat about anything.
That's really nice. Do you actually get to have? You're gonna have donuts. You just
yeah. You have
virtual donut.
Virtual donuts.
I like the sound of that. I might. We'll have to send you some donuts so you can actually have them
Please
have them in person. Listen,
send my way.
Your charity does amazing work, the Down Award. You are an amazing and inspirational leader of it as well. And we appreciate you coming on with us today to talk about some tricky subjects, but subjects that still need to be spoken about. And it's been great hearing from you. Do you want to just tell us all your social media details so people can follow you if they're not doing so already, heaven forbid?
And why not? Yes, it's definitely. We are Diana Ward is at Diana Ward. We're on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. It's just at Diana Award. And myself, I'm on Instagram. It's at Tessy Ojo, so it's quite simple, Tessy Ojo. I'm on Twitter. It's a little bit more trickier to find me because I'm T-tall, which is just. When I was younger, I used to be teased that I was too tall. And so my Instagram handle is T-tall, which is too tall. I know it's a bit, but then.
And you get some good. I've seen some good pictures of you in your garden, sort of saying it's Monday or it's Friday or something. They look very, interesting and entertaining.
Well, I try. You just have to have a good balance. Life is hard enough, so you just have to have a little bit of work and a little bit of play.
Yeah, great. Listen, we'll keep up the good work. It is challenging as it is during lockdown. I'm sure all the people that you're helping appreciate that you're still there, and hopefully we'll see you in person soon, Tessy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tessy. It's been lovely having you. Thank you, Tessy.
Now, we mentioned Zoom calls at the very top of this podcast, the Queen doing some form of video call. William and Kate obviously have been doing them for a long time, and we had them video calling some volunteers this week, particularly from the Shout text service that William helped launch. I think Harry helped launch it as well, didn't he, when it first started, where people can text to get help. Now, when you're texting a counsellor on the other end of the line, you don't know who that counsellor is. It's a text service, and it was revealed, or William revealed, that he is one of those that's been doing the texting.
I'm going to share a little secret with you guys, but I'm actually on the platform volunteering.
Oh, are you? Amazing.
Yes, I am.
Well, welcome to the team.
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys are the trailblazers. So you guys have been doing a fantastic job and keeping Shouts moving forward. So well done, and thank you for all your hard work. We really appreciate it.
So that video was to mark Volunteers Week here in the UK, and we saw various members of the royal family paying tribute to our volunteers across the country throughout the week. And we were also treated to a new image of the Duke of Cambridge with his children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, out volunteering on the Sandringham estate. And if you remember, we were given some photographs of Princess Charlotte for her birthday recently, and it was part of that collection of images. They were out, the family had made homemade pasta together on the in Sandringham, and then they were out delivering it to people that were vulnerable and isolating during the pandemic.
It's funny what you learn on these Zoom calls. So we obviously learned that William's one of these text counsellors, and you'll never know, by the way, if you do need the help of this great charity called Shout, and you text for help. But we also learned that Kate isn't actually very good at which game?
So what do you do? What do you do as part of your volunteering?
Well, I started off teaching the younger children how to play chess and things like that, and then I just stayed, and then I was just going into Chess Centre with Serena and stuff, and volunteering, helping them out with the projects.
Are you a chess maestro, Kate?
Yes, I'm not that good because I don't want to have anybody to play with.
Kane, you'll have to give me some lessons. I'm terrible.
You're a wonderful teacher, honestly.
She might be bad at chess by her own admission, but she's not a bad photographer by all accounts. And we discussed this on the podcast a few weeks ago when she launched the Hold Still competition or appeal for people to send in their portraits of life in lockdown in the UK. Now, she announced this week she's had 12,000 of them, but still wants some more.
Yeah, 12,000 entries to this competition so far, and this is, as you say, it's creating a snapshot portrait of the UK in lockdown. So images submitted are showing people's mood, hopes, fears, feelings throughout the lockdown. And as I say, they've had 12,000 entries so far. There is a week left to go until the deadline. So she's encouraging people to get their submissions in. They will then select 100 images, the very best images, and they'll have a sort of virtual, as is everything these days, a virtual gallery of the best.
And Kate said at the beginning some of the pictures that had inspired her, or she thought the kind of pictures she'd like to see. So when she gave this video message, we saw some of the pictures that have been submitted, and they are actually quite powerful, from nurses who look exhausted to little children trying to touch their grandparents through the glass. Worth having a watch of these pictures as Kate speaks about her project.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who's taken part and contributed to Hold Still. I've seen some amazing images, and I just wanted to share some of those images with you today. The first image I wanted to show you was this one, which I think is fantastic, and I think a lot of families out there can probably relate to this, which is a sweet little girl in the background trying to sing Elsa's Let It Go. It's called Distance Gaming, and this ingenious 6-year-old girl is here photographed with her granny playing a game, I think, of noughts and crosses it looks like, but what a great idea. This was another great image, I thought, and shows how communities are coming together. I think this is sort of shows such a fun idea. There's a shame there's no audio to go with this one. And this last image, I think, is hugely moving and very emotional, and I think the name says it all really, the man behind the mask. We mustn't forget the human side and the reality of what lots of the key workers and those on the front line are going through at this time.
So I wouldn't call that a quiet week. Prince Andrew, the Queen, Duke of Edinburgh's 99th birthday, Trooping the Colour or mini version of coming up. William and Kate admitting that they're volunteering. I mean, that's not a quiet royal week.
No, this week it does definitely feel like, I mean, it has stayed busy-ish throughout the lockdown, but this week feels like we've sort of gone up a gear. So I don't know if, you know, as the lockdown here is easing, perhaps we're going to sort of begin to see more and more from the royal family.
I know that discussions are going on about at what point you can get the royals back out in public again, but without attracting a crowd and with be adhering to social distancing. I mean, there's probably only one couple that can really do it as well at the moment, which is William and Kate. Charles and Camilla both in their 70s, the Queen and Prince Philip both in their 90s. He's retired in any case. So that ain't going to happen. So I would expect all those conversations are going on with William and Kate. Anyway, nevertheless, that's another Royal Rota, done, dusted. We managed to get through it, despite the fact that I had someone sort of drilling and banging in the room next door, switching off the electrics. You probably noticed the light behind me went on, off a few times. Nevertheless,
hopefully we've managed to cut out all the actual banging
all the
going on in the background.
The banging, and my phone's now saying it's only got 10% battery left. So you know what? If we don't end this Royal Rota soon, we'll be doing it into a black screen in any case. So thank you very much for continuing to watch Royal Rota ITV, YouTube, on your podcast platforms. If you're following us on social media, on Twitter, I am @ChrisItV, and you are
@Lizzie ITV.
On Instagram, we are @ITV News Royals. 55,000 people following that account now with all the latest pictures of all the royal families. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you probably from home, probably again after another busy week next week.